Good evening, alienated parents, alienated grandparents, alienated children worldwide. Welcome to Let's Talk on Parent Alienation. Tonight we have a special guest all the way from British Columbia, Canada. Yay, Canada, here we are. We have Edward Kruk, PhD. I'm from Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, so we are in the same country, but parent alienation is worldwide. It's not just in one country and not in another. It's everywhere where there's a family court system, everywhere there's a child and two parents going through a divorce or separation. So I'm not going to stop too much here because we have our guest here that's going to be sharing about 20 to 30 minutes of his time on what shared parenting should be like going through the court system. Edward Kruk is an associate professor of emeritus social work at the University of British Columbia, specializing in child and family policy. As a child family social worker in Canada and in the UK, he has practiced in the fields of welfare rights, child protection, school social work, hospital social work, and family services. He is currently teaching and practicing in the area of family mediation and addictions. Thank you so much, Edward, for coming out here. You've written many books here. I know you have 3 on father's rights and then 1 on shared parenting.
Mm-hmm. Well, yes, although just a very quick correction. The books aren't on father's rights. I guess I have a couple of books on the effects of divorce and parental alienation on fathers. But I'm less interested in father's rights as I am in responsibilities. Because it seems to me that the more we talk about rights, we forget about our responsibilities to our children. So my kind of mantra is, it's the responsibility of social institutions like the courts, social welfare institutions, etc., to support parents, both parents, in the fulfillment of their parenting responsibilities. So the responsibilities are on the social institutions and also on parents to the children's needs in the whole separation transition period. So yeah, less about father's rights as I am focused on children's needs and parental and social institutional responsibilities. And I've also written books on parental alienation, on shared parenting. I've got a book called The Equal Parent Presumption. I'm also the president of the International Council on Shared Parenting, which is an international body comprised of scientists, family professionals, and NGOs that are concerned with this whole issue of what are the best interests of children in the divorce period, and to what degree is shared parenting commensurate with those rights. That's a little bit about me.
Wow, that's a lot about you. Thank you so much for all you do. I don't know if I should ask you, but are you an alienated parent, or how did you get into the field of doing all this if you're not?
Yeah. Okay, nothing like, direct questions.
Sorry.
I have 2 children, 2 grown-up boys, and I have experienced the whole adversarial process, I would say, and the harms that causes, and I've been challenged by that, and also struggled with maintaining meaningful relationship with my kids. But at the same time, I've always worked with children and families as a professional social worker, even before I had that personal experience. And, I worked in the school system with children of divorce and parents. I worked in family services and as a mediator. And then I had over 30 years of research and teaching in the field of child and family social work, with a focus on children's experiences in the whole separation period, and what factors are key in their adjustment to their parents' divorce. It isn't divorce per se that's problematic for children, because most kids, when they maintain loving and meaningful relationships with both parents, settled in quite well after a period of time, especially when the conflict between their parents diminishes. The key, though, is that they're shielded from conflict and they're able to maintain good relationships with both parents. Often the outcomes are much better for those kids rather than living in a high conflict household. So it's not that, it's just the fact that so many children are in danger of losing contact with one of their parents. And actually, after being a social worker for many years in this field of child and family, I decided to do a PhD um, on why it is that so many parents lose contact with their children after separation. This is actually back in the 80s. Sorry, yeah, 1980. I embarked on that research in 1985, and the term parental alienation hadn't been invented at that point. There was no term for it. There was one term that was used widely, and that was deadbeat dad. No one ever heard of mothers losing contact, but there was a lot of research coming out in North America on the just how what a huge proportion of fathers were losing contact with their children as non-custodial fathers. Everyone just thought they were really, to say irresponsible is is putting it mildly. Deadbeat dad kind of connotes the idea that these are fathers who are footloose and free from any kind of care for their children. They never were interested in their children. They're just deadbeat, and it's best to just uh, punish them with the strictest measures possible. But I had been working as a social worker and actually kind of witnessed this deadbeat dad phenomenon because I was working mainly with single mothers and their kids, and fathers were out of the picture. I decided to do a PhD to examine why it is that so many fathers lose contact, and I found totally opposite kind of picture to the deadbeat dad phenomenon. These were fathers who were grieving the loss of their children very intensely, and they were grieving because of the absence of their children in their lives. They're grieving because they had lost their identity as a parent, which to them was the most important part of who they were, not their occupations or anything else. And also, they were suffering the constraints of, at best, being able to visit their children only occasionally, and that always being under threat. They, it was kind of a court system that just removed them as fit and loving parents from the lives of their children, and they were really powerless to do anything about that. Now, since then, I've done studies on alienated mothers because they were totally ignored. So mothers experience the same grief, and but even more so, a sense of shame and embarrassment, and just ostracism from society if they're custodial mothers who lose contact with their kids. I also have researched the impact of divorce on grandparents who were involved with their kids' lives, but then suddenly find that their relationship with their grandchildren is under threat as a result after divorce of one of their adult children. Now I'm researching grandparents who've never met their grandchildren, who were alienated from their own kids. Their own kids now are grown up and having children of their own, and these grandparents don't have no contact whatsoever, and I've never even met their grandchildren. So their pain is especially acute. So I've kind of looked at it from many angles, but always from the standpoint of people who are most directly negatively impacted by the present adversarial system, those being children and targeted parents who are alienated from their children's lives, and grandparents. And I've also done a lot of research on family mediation as an alternative to adversarial resolution of disputed issues. um, I've looked at mediation as a tool which can be used to assist parents in the development of a co-parenting or a shared parenting plan. I'm a very strong advocate of shared parenting as the foundation of family law. That's the main reform that's needed to address parental alienation. Shared parenting prevents parental alienation in the first place. So the more jurisdictions establish that as a legal presumption, the less alienation can take root, and the much better outcomes for both parents and their children in shared parenting situations, as opposed to the court putting itself in a role where they they remove one parent from the life of a child just because they say that's in the children's best interest when they can't get along or make a decision, which is so not true. And of course, nowadays I'm especially immersed in the whole field of parental alienation as a form of family violence and coercive control and also child abuse, because the effects of parental alienation on children are really horrific. It's a complex form of trauma. It's child abuse writ large. So yeah, that's been my life over the past 30 years, and I have had some lived experience in this area, but also, having worked as a social worker in different fields of child and family social work, but also over 30 years of working as a researcher and professor at UBC. Um, I've studied many aspects of this whole question. So, um, yeah, that's
So,
it.
statistically speaking, what amount of alienated children are there in Canada versus the United States? Do you
Hmm.
think it would be even? I know
It
there's
is,
22 million in the States.
yeah, it is pretty even, and I know that because my colleague Jennifer Harmon has conducted research in both Canada and the United States. She's a leading scientist in the field of parental alienation, who
Right.
has demonstrated that parental alienation is much, much more widespread than we commonly assume, and and its effects are really pronounced. I think it's important to distinguish between a moderate, mild, or moderate parental alienation. We're all capable of that,
Right.
but to some degree. But the and we distinguish those cases from the more severe cases of the more toxic cases of parental alienation, where a parent is just so determined to seek revenge or somehow punish the other parent that they are completely blind to the child's needs for the other parent in their lives, for containment of hostility. Um, their hatred of the other parent, which they never seem to be able to let go of, despite the fact that they just make a clean break and just cut them out of their lives, their children's lives. Um, yeah, their hatred for the other parent, their obsession with that parent, is stronger than their care and love for the child, which is pretty much non-existent because it is a form of abuse. It's a form of psychological or emotional child abuse that's also very much linked with other forms of abuse, neglect, and physical abuse. They often go hand in hand. So, but the main point about parental alienation is that it's enabled by our court system, which sets parents up from the get-go to become enemies. Lawyers tell their clients not to communicate directly with each other, but only through the lawyers, and then they really polarize the parents. It's a process of polarization, and the courts then set people up to to basically produce the worst possible outcomes. It pits parents against each other, fighting for their children and who will be the primary caregiver of their children. what may have started out as a mild kind of situation of disagreement or conflict between the parents becomes exacerbated, often leading to first-time violence. What's a really shocking statistic that's not talked about enough is that fully 50% of first-time family violence occurs during and after parental separation in the context of adversarial divorce, because the stakes are so high, people's emotions are running so high, the level of fear and anxiety and hostility is really at a level they've never experienced before. So the adversarial system brings out the worst in people and really puts children at risk as a result. And it feeds off that kind of hostility that it manufactures, and it's never ending and it's never resolved. So the system benefits, but parents and children are the ones who suffer greatly, especially those who are estranged and alienated from each other.
And I could testify to that because for 18 years I've been alienated from my children, and due to false allegations, even though I beat the allegations, the judge still allowed the teenage children to go with the father, to giving me a phone call a day after raising them for 19 years alone because of his military career. And I thought that was the most devastating thing a human can do, to take away children from a mom or a dad. And I asked for equal shared parenting. I told the kids they could go with their dad whenever they wanted to, but that wasn't good enough because the father learned all those tactics from his own alienation. His mother took him from his own father at 9 months. We found him at 25 years of age. He ended up getting killed, the father, my father-in-law, to never seeing him. And then he seeked revenge on me because I brought back old wounds. I brought,
Yeah.
what do you call it? False hope.
It's often said that alienators reenact their sort of family drama from their childhood, and they recreate what happened in their own family of origin, and
Exactly.
take on the role of the protective parent themselves. They see themselves that way. They see the other parent as a danger to their children, and children as vulnerable. But nothing can be farther from the truth, because a parental alienation situation is one where there has been a good relationship between the targeted parent and the child previously. There's no evidence of abuse or neglect. The child is basically manifesting behaviors that are taught by the alienating parent, who uses all kinds of tactics to separate the child. So we do know that alienating parents, alienators, have a much greater probability of substantiated abuse against them, other forms of abuse,
Right.
than targets of parental alienation. It's often argued, well, um, you know, alienated parents are just making charges of alienation to hide their own family violence. And in fact, the research shows the opposite, that alienators have an 82% greater probability of substantiated abuse against them than targeted alienated parents. And also, at the same time, targeted parents are more likely to be falsely accused of abuse and family violence. And again, there's a tremendous amount of research that demonstrates that. So it's, I think now we're at a point where there's a consensus among people who are researching in this field that this is a worldwide problem that's much more prevalent than we have known to date, and that the effects on targeted parents and children are very serious. And it's intergenerationally transmitted. So we've got to find a way to um, to address this and kind of stop this intergenerational transmission of alienation. I've always kind of maintained that the key to addressing parental alienation is to prevent it in the first place, and the best way to prevent it is to establish a legal presumption of shared parenting um, as the foundation of family law. So when people can't agree on caregiving arrangements, then it's just simply automatic that the children will reside with each parent an equal amount of the time, that each parent is equally important in the child's life, and that's the opposite to this sort of situation now in Canada, especially, and in many US states, where people are forced to fight for the primary custody of their children, primary residence, and aren't given an opportunity to share the care of their children because the court just has made a decision, there's the judges have a bias that if parents can't get along and can't agree and be perfect pals, at a divorce, then the children are going to be caught in the middle of hostilities between them, and it's better for the child to reside with one parent than with both. But actually, the opposite is true. As I say, um, shared parenting reduces conflict between parents, whereas the kind of sole custody regime exacerbates conflict, and it's never ending. So, reform of the family law system is the first step, the most important step, establishing shared parenting as the foundation, protecting both parents' relationship with the children, providing supports such as family mediation services, coaching for parents, parenting coordination programs, helping parents do parallel parenting if they have to. All of these programs can really help parents to make shared parenting a reality when they maybe feel feel challenged by this idea that how are they going to share the care of the person they're estranged with the other parent. In addition to establishing shared parenting as the foundation of family law, we really need a lot of support for currently alienated parents and children, and reunification programs to reunite them, take kids away from the orbit of the alienating parent, and provide them an opportunity to heal and restore bonds with the parent that is on the periphery of their lives. Um, it's so vital to children's well-being. They kind of internalize this hatred directed toward the other parent. Uh, they they yeah, self-hatred is quite common among alienated children. They feel that part of them is somehow unworthy, inferior, and then they feel tremendous guilt because they're sort of rejecting the parent. Um, they're forced to reject and hate a parent. They end up hating themselves. They end up being socially isolated, very dependent on the alienating parent. They have poor relationships with both the alienating parent and, of course, the target parent. They seem to aimlessly drift through life. Their life chances are so much diminished as a result of alienation.
Yes, my own adult children are going through it. They're in their late 30s now, no relationships, no children. They just don't even get along with each other. They don't bond. And one seeks attention from the father on social media, by reposting, mentioning the dad's name. The other one, did I do good, dad? Did I do good? And yet there's another one that pushes herself away because he's so enmeshed with her that it almost looks like she's the partner to him. And it's the saddest thing to see because that child doesn't have a boyfriend or a husband where she should. And these kids, as adults, have gone through the divorce court, and they're not even married. And they're stuck there for life. It's so sad. how these young kids will eventually all fall into the same category because they're all traumatized. Their brains aren't really developed, right? At 14, 15, 16, they can't handle adult issues. We can't handle adult issues, otherwise we wouldn't be alienating from, the other parent. If we
Mm.
had enough guts to sit down with the other parent and say, look, in the best interest of the children, how about you have them this week, I have them this week? And that way, the kids will be happy, healthy, mentally, emotionally, psychologically. Some even have body dysmorphia because they're not growing into their brains, right? And I've seen all this working with the military as a dispatch and getting all these 911 calls that they don't get to see their kids when they come back from the field and stuff. They're locked out. It's heartbreaking. And I never thought it would happen to me, but I got forewarned. If I left, he would do it. And obviously he did it, and the court system allowed it to happen. But how do we get these judges to really see what's happened to our kids? I mean, I went to a trial, but I had to shut it down because my 34-year-old son suffered a psychotic episode on Zoom. I didn't want him to go through it anymore. So I
Mhm.
just threw a figure at him and said, here. And then all of a sudden it ended. But my kids got pushed away further. They're now more damaged than ever because they had to look at me for 5 days, cursing me, swearing at me. I was so bad that I thought, wow, how did I even exist on this earth?
Yeah.
Because I was once a very loving mother. 2 months later, they hate me.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
when we do this, to present to judges in all these um, surveys that have been going on, and case studies, why are these judges still not seeing what happens to our adult kids? That's why domestic violence is so prominent from them, right?
Mhm.
Because they learned it.
Well, there's no question that parental alienation is child abuse writ large, and it's a form of family violence directed at the target parent that's also severe and should be treated as such. It's both a form of child abuse, which warrants a child protection response, and it's a form of family violence, which warrants a criminal justice response. There's no question about that. Recently, I made a presentation entitled Why Courts at All? The fact is that judges are not trained in the finer points of child development and family dynamics, and they're not even trained to be able to kind of ascertain um, what is expert opinion and what is not expert opinion. They're really there's really no necessity for judges to be making these decisions if there was a legal presumption of shared parenting that's automatic 50-50 time with each parent, with mediation services and other support services available to assist parents in the development of a co-parenting, shared parenting plan. Um, we really don't need courts at all in the vast majority of cases. Now, this would be rebuttable in cases of family violence. There is, the great majority of divorces involve some degree of conflict, but not family violence. Family violence occurs usually much later um, as the conflict gets exacerbated by the court system. But uh, in the majority of cases, shared parenting would basically establish kind of a foundation of family law where children automatically are placed in dual residence situations, as in many of the Scandinavian countries where there's no law, no court involvement. It's just that's it's recognized that in two-parent families, the norm is now that parents are sharing the care of both their children in the two-parent family, and there's no reason that can't continue after separation. So um, So legal presumption of shared parenting, rebuttable in cases of family violence. Of course, the safety of children of abused spouses and their children is of paramount importance when it comes to cases where there has been family violence, where that's been substantiated and proven, and those cases should be dealt with accordingly through child protection involvement, criminal court, etc. But in all other cases, are judges really the best people to determine what is in the best interest of children? This whole concept of the best interest of the child, it's really just an empty vessel into which adult prejudices, the prejudices of judges, are poured. It's an empty vessel. It's really, they're not trained in these delicate areas of child development and family dynamics, and really have no business making these determinations when they don't have um, that background, and even a little bit of training isn't going to help. So the best laws are the ones that limit judicial discretion, and I'd say in no other field, um, in the family law field, like no other field, this should apply. The less judicial discretion, the less involvement of judges in the courts in these cases, the better. If there's a very clear kind of definition of the best interest of the child being um, having both parents maximally involved in their lives, and reduction and containment of conflict between the parents.
Wow. So people that are going through conflict right now and they're not haven't seen their children in a year, 2 years, what do you suggest they do? Or can you help them?
Yeah. hmm Well, I think, as I say, prevention of parental alienation in the first place is really the key. But once it's kind of taken hold, it's really resistant to therapeutic intervention. But very important that you never give up, obviously,
Right.
uh, and to know that the extreme reactions of children are really a reflection of the poison of the alienating parent in their lives. And when you remove these kids from that poison, that orbit of the alienating parent, that they show a capacity to reunite with the parent who's been excluded from their lives. So we need a lot more in the way of reunification programs by trained specialists, therapeutic support to alienated children and targeted parents. Um, and we need more public education on the whole issue of parental alienation. And I think with that, I'll probably wind down for now, because I think we've probably reached our half hour.
Yes,
Uh,
we have. I was just going to say, your final word out there to parents. You obviously said never to give up. That is my final word always. Um, but yes, thank you so much for coming on to Let's Talk and sharing all this information, because we do need to get these judges and lawyers educated, or even to stop pitting parents against parents.
Indeed.
It's a sad situation for everybody that has been dealt with. Lawyers do get disbarred if they do get caught, because I know I had a lawyer that got disbarred just recently, and they need to bring out more um, out there to show that they are doing their due diligence and keeping the children and the families together instead of separating them.
Yeah.
So again, don't jump off yet, but I want to say goodnight to all the alienated parents and grandparents and children out there. If you're listening, please never give up on your parents, on your siblings, on anyone in your family, because don't let anyone dictate that you are hated, that nobody wants to see you. We all want to see you. So again, thank you, Edward Kruk, for sharing all of this information with us. We are so grateful.
Thank you.
So, good night.